Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, your Sunday morning news and politics show for the Hoosier State without all that MAGA bad faith BS. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. I've got a great panel with me here today. We're going to meet them in just a second. First things first, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and go ahead and hit that bell icon so you get a notification whenever we're about to go on. Also on Facebook Live, be sure to follow us so you get notifications. And hey, if you're watching on Twitch, welcome. Good to see you over there. So let's begin here. I'm going to welcome in my panel. First, welcoming back to the show, there is Derrick Holder. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much for having me again. It's always a joy.
Thanks for being back. Always good to see you. And also returning to the show, back from last week for an encore, Jennifer David. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
Really appreciate you being here today. And finally, we had a late-minute cancellation, and our emergency pinch hitter is Scott Johnson. Scott, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. All right. So, with the niceties out of the way, let us begin by taking a quick look around Indiana's headlines in a segment I like to call Around the Corn. This week, Monday, Task Force 1, an elite team of Hoosier first responders, arrived back in Indiana after aiding the Texas flood response. Indiana's higher education commissioner, Chris Lowry, announced he will step down in October. Indiana State Fair kicked off Friday. And former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke is in Indiana holding a town hall this afternoon. By my count, couple quick hits for you here, guys. Jennifer, Beto O'Rourke, you a fan?
I actually have a ticket to go. I can't say I'm a huge fan. He did put his name in for president, so I appreciate that. What I do appreciate is that he is coming out, and I feel like more Democrat leadership is starting to come out. And so that is important to me. He's from Texas, right?
That is correct.
And for some reason in my mind, something weird that he did during his campaign sticks in my head, but I can't think of what it is. Does anybody remember? Didn't he do some kind of...
I'm not sure what thing you're referring to in particular, but
neither am I. That's why I'm asking. I just feel like there was something...
He's a very effective communicator, and I think one thing he does is he's willing to go a little further in saying controversial things that a lot of Democrats would. Like he said, maybe this is what you're referring to in response to gun control. I think he said, "Yes, I am coming for your guns."
I think you might be right. Yeah, and that probably just that was not helpful to him. So he seems like he has a good personality. Not to change the subject, but I'm down here by Louisville, so I'm also hearing a lot more about Governor Beshear putting his name in for president. So, but yeah, back to him. I don't really have a huge opinion, but I appreciate the fact that he's, I think, a good Democrat and that he is out there, being a leader.
Yeah,
we need that. Sure. We need that.
Derrick, this is obviously.
I will say that, Ms. Mann.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure the protocol yet. I will say that I am a fan. I've been in touch. I've been in touch with his campaign. They asked me to promote the event a little bit, which I did, and I'll be there later today. And when the right has gone this far right, the left's going to have to go a little more left, and that's not a bad thing, right? Because ultimately, the real path is always down the center. And you've got two extremes, so you have to get by having people at both ends, we'll end up more in the center.
Yeah, absolutely. And Derrick, I think Scott makes a very a good observation here that the way the Democrats maybe have been doing things, trying to find middle ground as the right has kept going further and further right. I mean, listen, I took elementary physics back in the day. If you look at a lever and a fulcrum, to balance things out, you don't move toward the middle, you move toward the other end.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Also,
and for a Texas man to say, "I'm coming for your guns," that is a bold statement.
Yeah.
And
because I mean, you're born in Texas and they give you a 357.
Yes. Congratulations, ma'am. Here's some diapers. Here are some wipes, and here is a shotgun. Yes. Also, hey, I saw the fair started last night. What's your favorite part of the fair, Scott?
It's always finding out what the new food of the year is.
What is it this year? Who knows?
I have no idea. I haven't been yet.
Deep fried something, one would hope.
It always starts with deep fried.
Derrick, how about you? The food, the rides, or the animals?
I liked the foot-long corn dog. I'm always a fan of a good corn dog. I mean, the animals, they're cool. I live in farmland, so I see animals all the time. So not much on the rides anymore because I have a 3-year-old. Someone has to sit on the ground with them. 16-year-old loves them.
Yes. Jennifer, do you trust fair rides?
Oh God, I don't know about fair rides, but I do love amusement rides. That made me think about going to like Six Flags or somewhere. So, but I don't know. Those ones, they just move around and pop up very quickly. So I'm not a huge fan. I am not a fan of the Ferris wheel. I will tell you that. That's one of the scarier rides to me.
Final Destination.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Something happened recently that made people start talking about the last movie. I can't remember what it was. Anyways, back to the fair. I have only been to the fair once. It's been 10 years. And the time I went, I actually went and they had ice skaters. They had made an ice skating ring outside, and you know how hot it is. But that was pretty neat. It was the first time I had the deep fried Oreos, which I like. But I'm in my 50s now. So fried food is like the devil's, I don't even know. It's like, I don't want to get on the health thing, but the stuff that we actually feed ourselves and feed everybody in Indiana is so awful. All those things that we go to the fair for that do taste very good, though.
No, you know what? Good transition moment there, Jennifer, because you said the devil. So let's speak of the devil and move on to this week's top stories.
So that could be any number of people. Look, I'm starting to tear up here.
Well, the devil I'm mentioning this time is Governor Mike Braun, who said Indiana will devote any and all resources necessary to help the Trump administration with their immigration enforcement and ICE roundups, saying, quote, Indiana is not a safe haven for illegal immigration. Indiana will fully partner with federal immigration authorities as they enforce the most fundamental laws of our country, end quote. Now, so this formal partnership is authorized under something called Section 287G of the Immigration and Nationality. That is a hard word to say. Immigration and Nationality Act. And so this allows ICE to delegate certain enforcement powers to state or local officers. There are 3 different kinds of programs: task force, warrant service officer, and jail enforcement. So the Indiana State Police have submitted a memorandum of agreement for the task force model, according to an ICE list of pending deals. And the Department of Corrections asked for a warrant service officer deal. And the agency is working with ICE to make available up to 1,000 beds at Miami Correctional Facility. So, Derrick, first things first. If I recall, Indiana's budget situation not looking too great.
Oh no, it's awesome.
$2 billion shortfall over the next budget cycle.
Mm-hmm.
The Braun administration imposed across-the-board cuts on all sort of state agencies. Yet, here we are turning up the heat on immigration, giving our police and corrections more resources for carrying out what I think is largely an unconstitutional immigration regime. What say you?
It's what a police state does. It takes money away from those who really need it, those programs that are deeply needed, and puts it into law enforcement, puts it into military, which I have no issue with the huge military. I'm a veteran, but puts it into authoritative programs that, you know, you think different, or you happen to be a different shade of brown than the rest of us are, then please go. We're going to arrest you for existing. And that's what I think is a big thing right now. Is there's a couple stories here today that you're just going to go to jail for existing. So it's horrible.
Yeah, no, you make a very good point. Like that big military, that big defense spending, the American empire that you mentioned, took its aggression to the rest of the world over the last 80 years. And I don't know if any of y'all are, familiar with Marxist theory, but they talk about the imperial boomerang.
Mm-hmm.
And when the empire has sort of reached its peak on the backside, on the downswing, that power, that authority, that militarism comes back for the population at home. Jennifer, is that what this looks like to you?
I have no idea. This just looks like the continuation of Trump's plan that he's had for a long time. I guess I have some question about the money. Where is that funding? How does that work through the federal government to the state for the beds, for the work? Is that our people? Is that people coming in from the federal government to?
That's a good question, because a lot of times, the Trump administration, and also the Braun regime for that matter, they get out ahead of themselves when they announce these things without all the
thinking it through,
T's being crossed and the I's being dotted. So I don't know what the exact numbers are and who's going to pay for what. You would think that with ICE getting something like $180 billion in this big stupid bill they just passed, that the money would be coming from them and not out of the Indiana General Fund. But nothing would surprise me anymore.
Well, I mean, because that's a lot of money, because we already in Clark County, they have people at I think the sheriff's there, and then Atterbury, and then you mentioned 1,000 beds in Miami. That's a lot of money on top of the manpower. So we'll be interested to know where that's coming from. Oh my goodness, did we lose our host?
Oh,
we lost our host.
It's anarchy.
I was about to take over there. I was like, it's my moment.
Yeah, sorry, we lost. I had to reset myself there a minute. I did not like what my green screen was doing, and I feel a lot better about it now. So, Scott, one more stat I want to throw out you here. So, all of this talk of stepping up in immigration enforcement further comes on top of the nearly 1,400 people in Indiana that have already been subject to ICE arrest since Trump's inauguration. That's almost an 80% increase over the same period last year. So already up 80%, gonna turn up the heat even farther. You're gonna round up innocent people if you keep going that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So a couple points. The first point to make is, if you know your history, the definition of white has changed dramatically over the years. Go back to the 1900s, you used to see signs, no Italians welcome here, no Irish welcome here. And yet now we view people who are Italian and Irish as entirely white, right? So first of all, it's always a moving target. Second comment I would make is, I was reading a book this morning, and one of the points they make, they quote Joseph Goebbels' 5 Rules of Propaganda. And Joseph Goebbels, of course, worked for Hitler.
Mhm.
And his 5th rule of propaganda is pick out one, quote, special enemy for special vilification. And these days, it's brown, and honestly, it's trans.
Yep.
Right? And Trump just added being homeless and having mental illness to the list this week. So these camps are going to be populated. And Derrick, your point that anyone could end up in here is exactly right.
Mhm.
Right, and because they've been ignoring due process, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
you hear apologists for this administration say, well, they're only rounding up illegal immigrants. Well, how do you prove whether or not you're an illegal immigrant if you don't have due process?
Yep.
Mhm.
Kilmore Abrego Garcia was never a member of MS-13, was never arrested in any country on the globe. And yet that poor bastard is still, as far as I know, locked the hell up.
But what about his tattoos that literally said MS-13?
Yeah, right.
Our dear leader has said that.
Yeah, dear leader says a lot of things.
Yeah. The same Sharpie Trump used to draw the path of the hurricane going over Alabama, he used to mark MS-13 on Kilmar Abrego Garcia's hand. So here's a story I like. This is kind of Indiana in a nutshell. So this week, we learned that State Senator Liz Brown from the Fort Wayne area, State Senate District 15, is going to be facing a primary fight. So check this out. Texts accusing quote-unquote liberal Liz Brown of betraying her conservative values on the Second Amendment and transgender issues have been flying in Northwest Indiana, fueled by a dark money social welfare nonprofit that no one knows about or isn't willing to divulge. This story from the Indiana Capitol Chronicle. So, Liz Brown, mind you, is very conservative. This is someone whose 2019 conservative rankings from CPAC was 85%, whose rankings from Americans for Prosperity, her conservative scorecard was 100 from them in 2022 and still an 86 over the next year. Very conservative. But yet, because she voted against one bill to ban transgender Hoosiers from high school sports in 2022, and because she did not get a very stringent immigration bill out of committee this past year, far-right Republicans in the state like Todd Rokita and Jim Banks have been calling her out. So we get these ads from this group called Hoosier Leadership for America. It's a nonprofit that was founded last year. No one knows who's behind it because it's one of these 501c4 dark money groups. It's got a Huntertown, Indiana P.O. box, and the incorporator is a man out of Virginia that the Capitol Chronicle could not locate. And when I hear man from Virginia, I'm thinking Jim Banks, because he lives there and not in Indiana. So, on Thursday afternoon, Darren Vogt, who previously served on the Allen County Council and is currently a member of the Northwest Allen County Schools, those poor kids, he announced his candidacy to challenge Liz Brown from her right. Jennifer, is this what happens when you have a gerrymandered state map and safe seats, right? This is a
This is what
Republican seat.
happens. Well, this is what happens when you don't fall in line. I mean, they're obviously just upset about her not voting the way that is expected.
Yeah. Well,
we do it if it was. I mean, we would do it if it was. We would do it too.
Would we? I mean, Republicans are very good at this. I mean, they need to keep you in line 100% of the time. Again, Liz Brown is a far right Republican.
Right. I was gonna say maybe not for those reasons. I don't think I want to walk that back. I guess I'm just more talking about primary. So I don't know though. I don't want us to get off track because I could go on a conversation about that. So
well, Scott, what say you?
I mean, it's obvious. This is the way that the Trump train has run for a long time. You fall in line or, we're going to primary you or we're going to destroy you. We're going to call you into court. We're going to fire you. We're going to do all sorts of things. It's revenge.
Yeah. Scott, what do you think? Like there's no room for even the slightest dissent in this MAGA coalition?
I think when you have when you have an authoritarian regime that is very much anti-woman and wants to return us to the 1950s, Jim Banks might be able to say something that's dissenting. She cannot. She has to toe a party line.
That's
my guess is this is about gender more than anything else.
Well, I had not thought of that, but
I don't know though. I mean, I feel like this is not the first time this has happened. Like, as a woman, I don't know how much of it is because of being female, because Trump's been picking off man after man for quite a while.
Well,
he has, but it always seemed to me like he's got a special hate on for women.
I think it might be Todd Rokita behind a lot of this. So apparently, the focus on Brown started when Rokita called her out for not hearing this immigration bill during the legislative session. She's the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee and had the power to choose which bills get heard, and ultimately this legislation died. And Rokita basically accused her of spiking it for personal reasons, and she turned around and filed a disciplinary action against Rokita, just one of many on his list. He's been before the state Supreme Court and the state ethics board more times than I could count. So is that something that she voted for, or is this personal with Rokita? Derrick, what do you think?
It's always personal with Rokita. You sneeze the wrong way and he's gonna say something with you. I mean, it's because I believe she did not fall in line with what the dear leader wanted on both sides, both Indiana and federal. And oh my God, she didn't agree with something. It's blasphemy for her not to do that. How dare she? She should be primaried.
This is what happens when you have severely gerrymandered states like Indiana, like Texas, we're going to talk about here a little bit later this morning. In cases like this, where you have these safe seats that are just, it's a Republican seat or a Democratic seat, and they're drawn so almost, it's almost guaranteed that the incumbent is going to win. The only place for competition then is in these primaries. And on the Republican side, we've seen this again and again in place after place, that you have to go further and further right to avoid being primaried. Now, I don't happen to think this exists so much on the other side. There isn't really much of a meaningful far left primarying Democrats, because in those races, all the money lines up behind the centrist Democrat. And what I feel like you have is both parties keep moving further and further to the right. So let's move on. The final story I wanted to cover in Indiana news this week sort of straddles the line with our national stories, because EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin was in Indiana this week to announce a proposal scrapping a 15-year-old regulation that empowers the EPA to curb greenhouse gas emissions, something that Zeldin billed as the largest deregulatory action in the nation's history. So a little background on this. In 2009, the EPA signed two distinct findings regarding greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. And the big one is called the endangerment finding. So the EPA found that the current and projected concentrations of 6 key greenhouse gases, CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, and others in the atmosphere threaten the public health and welfare of current and future generations. Therefore, it is incumbent upon the EPA to regulate these greenhouse gases. So if finalized, this proposal by Zeldin and Trump's EPA would strip the EPA's authority to set these standards for greenhouse gas emissions on motor vehicles, on power plants. Jennifer, make India or make America healthy again, right? That's RFK's slogan. Well, this isn't his department, but how are we going to make America healthy again if we quit regulating pollution? Oh, you're on mute, Jennifer.
Sorry, my dogs are barking. Well, you're asking the wrong person, because I think we should be regulating pollution. It's terrible that they are pulling a lot of these back. We're going to see more and more of this, especially in Republican states. So I don't know. And then we also, we're destroying the healthcare system. So as people get sick, more and more sick, where are they going to go?
It really is this vicious cycle, and we see it in all throughout government, right? With the health, the environmental factors, they're deregulating those while also cutting healthcare on the back end. The housing, we're going to talk about that later. They're cutting services. They're cutting public housing. They're focusing on incarceration more than making wonderful lives for people. It's upside down. We're in bizarro world. Derrick, good friend Todd Rokita, who we were just talking about, said during this press conference, quote, "Do not listen to those haters. The sky will not fall. We have the cleanest air, the cleanest water." You want to push back on that?
I would like him to take a glass of water from the White River just south of Anderson. It should be nice and clean from up there. When you hear stories about coming out of downtown Indy, where the White River and Fall Creek meet up, and they're finding stuff in there. And who wants to drink that water? Yeah, we have the cleanest water. Go to Geist, where the water's not the best. There's the algae plumes that pop up every so often. Down here in Martinsville, with the White River that runs through here, there's major PFAS and coal ash that's in the river. So there's a disconnect from some of these people that they turn off the part of their brain that screams all the time, there's something wrong, and they're like, oh, this is perfectly fine.
Well, my favorite part about this with Rokita is this is so easily checkable. And I'm looking at right here. Here's one from the Indianapolis Star in 2022. New report finds Indiana has the most dirty waterways in the U.S. Agriculture is the main culprit. I've got another one here. Oh, Indianapolis Metro among worst air quality. So Todd Rokita is out there saying we have the cleanest air, the cleanest water. No, we have the dirtiest water and among the dirtiest air. Scott, what the hell? Indeed, Scott, what the hell? He's lost right
when
there.
There we when you sell out your political campaign to big oil, this is the environmental legislation you're going to get. It's just that simple. The reason Trump is pro-fossil fuel and anti-solar and anti-wind is because solar and wind are actually, for the first time, really very much viable alternatives to petrochemicals. And last year, for the first time, the amount of power the world got from solar exceeded fossil fuels. That is literally, if you're an oil company, that is an existential crisis. And so what they're trying to do is they're trying to roll back the sands of time and roll back the history of technology and say, no, we don't want that. The problem is, it is an impossibility. All the factories in China that are going to ship solar cells, they're all built. They're going to ship them ad nauseum forever. Solar is just going to go cheaper and cheaper. Batteries are going to get better, and the oil companies have a declining asset value, and they can't admit it. So their approach is to go for legislation, so the U.S. can be a greenhouse gas, bonanza for the world. And ultimately, it's never going to work. You cannot fight the pace of big technology. We have been seeing this for 50 or 60 years now.
Boy, they're going to try, right? I mean, with
they're going to try, and it's not going to work because one of the comments I made at a protest recently was, that's fine. They can shut down big solar plants on federal land. They can shut down wind energy plants on federal land and let 1 million homes put solar panels on, right? Because the cost of energy keeps going up I don't know if you've seen the graph that parallels, as we export more LNG, the cost of electricity just goes up, right? So my advice for Hoosiers, put solar cells on your roof. Don't pay those inflated electrical bills.
Yeah, and this is something I believe just happened this week as Trump was in Scotland announcing deals with the European Union. And one of the things in this framework was that the EU is supposed to buy something like $750 million worth of liquid natural gas over the next however many years. Like you said, as we're exporting this natural gas, our prices go up. I mean, yeah, that's just simple supply and demand. There's less here in this country. It's going to cost more, right? It is plain to me that Zeldin, Braun, Rokita, Trump, these guys are prostitutes for the fossil fuel industry and will do anything for their sugar daddies.
Oil daddies.
Sugar daddies, oil daddies, coal daddies. Is a coal daddy a thing?
Coal daddies, yeah. Hoosier Action did a really good job last year in educating people about like Duke Energy and how our rates were going to go up, which they are going up, and just a lot of like what we're talking about with surplus and policies and donations and PACs and all of that.
Well, and that's the real bull, right? Because the whole drill baby drill mantra of these Republicans, the justification they give is that we're going to, put more supply into the system and it's going to drive down prices for Americans. And we've seen this to be not true at every step of the way, right? Our electric rates just went up something like another 27% or something. It was a lot, and they're only going to keep going up further. You know, you can't drill your way to a cleaner future. I don't know. So let's go ahead and move on to our national stories. This is our sort of a transition as we, straddle the state and national news. Welcome back, Scott, who disappeared there briefly. Let's move on to our national stories and start with the headlines. And so this week, the Epstein story continues to haunt Trump. Not as loudly this week. Maybe this thing is fading, though we hope not. We want to keep this in the news because this is really putting pressure on that administration. But this week, like we said, Trump was in Scotland golfing and holding a couple meetings to make it look like he was doing some work. But while he was there, he was still being questioned about this Epstein thing. On Tuesday, he, on Air Force One, said that Epstein, quote, stole people that work for me, which is a really gross way to say things. That kind of implies ownership. And later in the week, Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, was transferred to a cushy Club Fed style federal prison in Texas. An unusual move because the Bureau of Prisons did not handle this transfer. Normally, the U.S. Marshals take care of this sort of thing, but sounds like maybe there was some interference from the administration to get her a cushy deal. And this is after last week, Trump's personal attorney and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche visited her at her previous location in Florida, granting Maxwell limited immunity to testify. It certainly appears that they are working on something shady with her. What do you think, Scott?
I think that when you have someone who's a convicted sex offender that gets into a cushy prison, and by federal law, that's not allowed.
Correct.
You have a problem. That's the start on a buy-off. And my suspicion is that she's now near a U.S. border. My suspicion is somehow she skips town.
Wow. Bold proclamation there from Scott. This is something we're going to keep an eye on. And I don't think that Trump is getting out from under this thing. His base is still pissed. So moving on also this week, the Senate voted against a resolution proposed by Senator Bernie Sanders to block arms sales to Israel as it continues to starve the population of Gaza. Now, though this resolution did fail, 27 Democratic senators, a majority of the caucus for the first time, did vote for the block. Now, Democratic Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Cory Booker, and other maybe more mainstream Democrats did vote against the measure, but progressives like Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin and Jeff Merkley of Oregon, who you would expect to vote along with Sanders on this, were joined by John Ossoff, Tim Kaine, Jeanne Shaheen, and Dick Durbin. 12 of these Democrats who voted for the measure previously voted in April against a similar resolution. So slowly, Democrats are starting to come around, lining up to tell Israel to stop the genocide. Derrick, I know things are bleak over there right now, but is this somewhat of a positive development?
It is. It's sad that it hasn't happened yet. I mean, as I've said many times before, I love Israel, but genocide's genocide, and it needs to stop. We need to stop providing arms to Israel to keep this up. Every time that we've tried to help feed the Palestinians, Israel has slaughtered them. Like, here's your food. Oh, by the way, you don't get to eat it.
Yeah, these aid distribution sites that have been set up by the U.S. and Israel have been nothing more than bait to lure desperate people to their demise. It is disgusting.
And it needs to stop. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know how much more can be said than that.
I'm glad that your average Democrat is kind of starting to put some distance between themselves and the Netanyahu government. Still not enough of them, still not quickly enough. Also this week, the Trump administration is apparently launching a new private health tracking system with the help of big tech. Yay. This one, from the AP, more than 60 companies, including Google, Amazon, and Apple, as well as healthcare giants like United Health Group and CVS, have agreed to share patient data in this system. The initiative will focus on diabetes and weight management, controversial artificial intelligence that helps patients, and digital tools such as QR codes and apps that register patients for check-ins or track medications. Jennifer, good idea or slippery slope? Or both?
I mean, it really depends on what they're looking for. Because, I mean, we live in a very unhealthy country, and there's all sorts of health issues out there that do need to be monitored, but I'm not exactly for sure what purpose they're wanting to do that. However, it does concern me as far as, again, people's personal information, and HIPAA, people do have the right to have their information protected, but there is things in there that the information can be used for. And I'm assuming that this is one of them. I need to go back and look at that because it's the form that you get every time you go to the doctor and pharmacist about keeping your information private. But there are, like I said, things that they can use it for.
To me, it seemed like it's something that we're kind of begging for. Like, we do need the ability to share this data between different health systems and different providers and whatnot. But this could potentially open a can of worms where you have all these private actors in here. You have hackers could get into systems. We've got the potential to see folks selling your personal data for profit.
They can use
very
the
much
information
does seem
for...
like a it's like a patchwork system, and
so I'm a behavior analyst, so data is great. And so again, it just depends on what they're going to use the data for. There's just so much out there with, are they looking at the people? Like, who are these people? There's been some states that have limited what you can use SNAP benefits for, food benefits. Are they looking at, are people that are on SNAP, do they have higher rates of heart disease, higher rates of diabetes because maybe they have more access to money? Maybe that could prove that. Maybe that could disprove some of the things that are people saying. I really don't think that they're trying to use any of the data to disprove anything that they're saying. They want it to prove that. And also just, to maybe see different areas of the state or of the country where you might have more health issues and you can do more interventions. But that is me as a Democrat talking about what I would use the data for. So I don't really know what they plan.
I feel like this is one of those things that it's a good idea, but it's all going to be about the implementation. And really, if we had a universal healthcare system like anywhere else in the world, we would be taking care of this upstream and not having all these private actors in here. Scott, you wanted to say something.
Yeah. So the first comment would be, first of all, how does this not violate HIPAA, right? We have very strict laws on health information sharing in the country. You want to violate HIPAA, go to Congress, pass a law. So that may be my first comment. Second comment is I would be extraordinarily dubious as of anything coming out of the tech industry. Why? Well, I've spent my life in the tech industry, and there's a fundamental belief among people who are highly successful in tech that they very much fall into what's called the Ayn Rand camp, that they quote unquote lifted themselves up by their bootstraps. And there's a lot of belief about means testing. There's a lot of belief that if you're not successful, it's your fault. It's a systemic problem with society. And when you have Trump putting out that, hey, if you got mental issues, you could be put in a concentration camp, and talking about sharing information like prescription drugs and things like antidepressants, if you're on an antidepressant, that can be deemed a mental health problem, right? It is by definition a mental health problem. You want to see lots more people rounded up, start sharing health data, right? And then don't even get me into the count of don't even bring up the issue of the fact that bringing back the presidential fitness test, right? And it sounds great on the surface, right? Americans are overweight. Sure. It sounds great, but what are they going to do with that data? This is an administration that has proved to be relentless, and they will take advantage of this data and they will do nefarious things with it. I have no problems making that bold proclamation.
And I actually fully agree with that. My first thing was, how is the administration going to use it to screw us? Like they did there was a report that they now have a list of people that are autistic. I'm like, thank you. I guess I'm on another freaking list. But I mean, I'm one of the few Americans where my medical data was already within the government's hands because I use the VA for everything. But I worry more for those that, have kids that are neurodivergent or have medical issues. What happens when and if or when this administration starts going more eugenics and getting rid of those issues?
I want to add something on the HIPAA. Oh,
yeah, please, Jennifer, go ahead.
Okay, so I did, of course, I looked it up. I have to have people fill this out all the time. So there is a part in there where it says that it can be basically used to collect information for public health, research, legal obligations. So one of those is for preventing and controlling diseases. So those, heart disease, diabetes, those are, diseases that are pretty rampant here. So that is how it's already written in law and has been for a very long time. They've been collecting information on us for a long time.
Yeah, this is there's a lot here, but I think fundamentally, if you build on top of a rotten foundation, then whatever you have is going to fall apart. I want to move on and make a quick mention of this one I saw yesterday. So apparently the Office of the Special Counsel is going to probe potential Hatch Act violations by former Special Counsel Jack Smith, who was investigating Trump's various crimes in the last couple years before his recent election. This announcement comes days after Senator Tom Cotton requested that the Office of Special Counsel investigate Smith for quote-unquote unprecedented interference in the 2024 election, claiming that Smith's legal actions were nothing more than a tool for the Biden-Harris campaigns. The Hatch Act, as we know, restricts federal government employees from using their positions to engage in political activities. Is it political activity to tell the truth about a criminal, Scott? I mean, what the hell?
Absolutely not, right? Like Jack Smith, you may not like him because from my perspective, he didn't do the job, right? But he was employed by the government. He followed the rule of law, and he investigated someone that was the federal government deemed a criminal. And now what's happened is the administration is going after him because, quite honestly, don't like him. No more than that. And we're going to see this is This is an incredibly dangerous precedent to set, because it means that anyone who works for the federal government for doing their job can now be investigated by the next administration. Why would anyone choose to work for the feds if that's the case?
It's very, very chilling. Also chilling is this week's announcement that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting is shutting down. So the CPB is the conduit that moves federal funds to NPR and PBS, and they announced Friday that they're going to begin winding down operations after the Congress clawed back over $1 billion in their funding through fiscal year 2027. They informed employees that a majority of staff will be eliminated at the end of the fiscal year, at the end of September, holding onto a small team for things like compliance and fiscal distributions and, royalties and whatnot through the end of the year. Here's the big one. Okay, so NPR, produces Morning Edition and All Things Considered, providing, accurate, impartial news to places that, not everybody is privy to these things. You get a lot of right-wing slop radio out in rural places, especially like Indiana. So NPR relies on direct federal funding for only a small portion of their budget, but approximately 1,000 member stations receive a much heftier portion of their operating revenue through the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, particularly those in poor and rural areas. So, Jennifer, are PBS and NPR going to survive without that CPB umbrella?
Yes.
You think so?
I think so. I think because we need it, and I think that people will find a way. I hope. I mean, they have been around for a long time. They're already somewhat publicly supported. You hear the campaigns, all the time. So I hope so, especially for these small communities. I've done a lot of work in rural and small communities, and when you're kind of in between Indianapolis and Louisville, you've got, a huge media gap there. And so it is very much needed. So I'm going to say yes.
I really hope so. I think you're going to get a lot more fund drives going forward, though. So I want to talk about a couple of our highlight stories here in the national news this week. In Texas, Republicans are going big in their brazen gerrymandering attempt. We sort of briefly talked about this over the last couple of weeks, but a draft map released Wednesday would add 3 new districts that would have voted for President Trump in 2024, and also put 2 House Democrats who won Trump districts in a lot of danger going forward. So essentially what's happening is Texas is going through a special session to redraw their congressional maps outside of the normal 10-year census cycle, specifically to steal 5 seats in the upcoming election. So let's see. The proposed map here, it says, is intended to help the GOP hold on to the House, where they have a historically narrow majority, and history suggests Democrats are very likely to pick up seats in the midterm elections. This map could help Republicans flip 5 of them, significantly raising the bar for a Democratic takeover of the chamber. Now, we talked about the effects of gerrymandering here in Indiana vis-a-vis Liz Brown a couple minutes ago, and how it just reinforces the cycle of extremism. Here, Derrick, it looks like you have a blatant, out in the open attempt to game the 2026 election at best. Steal might be a word you'd prefer to use. What say you?
I mean, any gerrymandering is horrible. It happens. Both sides do it. But there needs to be a limit to it. I personally would like it to go away completely, but
Yes.
that's not going to happen. I really hate to say this, but it's part of the game. And I mean, it needs to stop, but I personally don't know how to stop it except for congressional passage of a bill.
And this was right there in the For the People Act, which Democrats proposed after winning in 2020. This was one of the things that they were supposed to get through. And, you know, you had a couple quote unquote centrist holdouts, your Joe Manchin types, who would not help get this thing over the line. That would have buried or banned gerrymandering in every district. Now, so what you have, and like you said, it is part of the game, at least the way things currently have. We've been gerrymandering since we became a country. In fact, it's named after like an early Massachusetts governor named Elbridge Gerry, hard G. But, you know, he sort of invented this practice in the 1700s, and we're still doing it. But Republicans do it way more and a lot more effectively. So this is from the Brennan Center. They found 11 Republican-drawn maps that had extreme partisan bias ahead of the 2024 elections compared to 4 drawn by Democrats. One of those 11 is Indiana. So Democrats are talking about doing some sort of tit for tat in California. Their governor, Gavin Newsom, is threatening to call a special session to redraw their maps. Hakeem Jeffries and Governor Kathy Hochul in New York are sort of having similar conversations. The problem is, in these Democratic states, there are a lot of self-imposed legal hurdles to doing this such thing. Scott, have Democrats unilaterally disarmed?
It certainly feels that way given the state of the country, doesn't it? Knowing a lot about Texas, I have no problem seeing that this happens in Texas. And the concern is that they're setting the Republicans very clearly have a long-term strategy that basically says they don't believe in democracy. They don't believe in there's going to be a left and a right. They just believe in there's going to be a right. And Democrats need to wake up and realize that we cannot have a perfect progressive world, right? And when you're on the left, the long policy of we eat our own young. If you're not perfect enough, if you're not, progressive enough, etc. And this is, an indication to me of the 4-alarm fire that we are currently undergoing. The Republicans will not stop. They'll do this. They'll do whatever to win. And they're looking. And if you look at Trump's big beautiful bill, and you mentioned earlier the $180 billion for ICE. That's $180 billion over 10 years. They are planning to do this crap for the next decade, right? It is time for people on the left to realize this and realize that perhaps we're going to have to bend some of our ideals. And I recognize the danger in that. I recognize the problems with potentially becoming the enemy you fear. However, I would say that the enemy we fear is actually here. And this is a very, very real thing.
The Democrats.
I hope Newsom does it. I hope Wisconsin does it. I hope New York does it. If we have to cheat a little bit, we're going to have to cheat a little bit.
Yeah, for far too long, I feel like Democrats have been bringing a pillow to a gunfight,
Exactly correct.
Well, so now you got me scared, but look, I actually thought I saw a silver lining in this. So, to me, if the Republicans are going through all this, talking about redrawing all these maps, and that this is how they're going to try and steal the 2026 election, at least that means they don't have a better plan and they don't have something more nefarious cooked up. Like, oh, okay, they're just redrawing the maps. Oh, okay, I can live with that. That's workaroundable. If they were planning on declaring a state of emergency and conducting the elections under like military occupation, that I would be worried about. You know,
the jury is out. Okay, what they're going to do is whatever they want to rule the country on a permanent basis. You look at the amount of money that got behind Trump, the billions and billions and billions of dollars. They didn't spend that money to lose. This is fundamentally, this isn't politics. This is an economic class war. You look at the vision that the tech industry has. I don't know if anyone's followed Curtis Yarvin and the Nerd Reich and that sort of look in the world. People want America to become like Atherton, California, which is a gated community. It's all white. The only people you ever see on the streets are gardeners and maids. This is a very dystopian world that they are aiming at. And our view of the world, where it's diverse, where it's multiracial, where it's, people get to do what they want. This is not at all the vision that they have.
Jennifer, could this potentially bite these Republicans in the butt? I've seen some folks suggest that they may be stretching their supporters too thin and wind up having some of these districts flip Democrat because they've taken so many of their supporters and dispersed them amongst different districts.
Right. I mean, just from little bits that I have heard over the last several weeks about this, it doesn't seem like it's like a super strong movement, that there is some pushback there in Texas. So I don't know, though, because we're always hoping something's going to give, right? As Democrats, like, is this going to be it? Is this going to be the thing that takes Trump down? Is this going to be the thing that, saves the country? So just like everything else, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But I will say the same thing I think Derrick brought up. I mean, if each party tries to do the same thing, because we're all trying to stay in power, because for some, we all seem to think that we're doing the right thing, that we're on the, the right side of good. And so that's what makes people do crazy things.
I will say this, at the very least, Democrats need to keep talking about doing their own gerrymander, if for nothing else than just to maybe give these Republicans pause about going big. So speaking of going big, Trump's big attack on higher education continued this week as another Ivy League institution rolled over. So Brown University struck a deal to restore $500+ million in federal funds by agreeing to contribute money to the state workforce development organizations, to end programs that, quote, promote race-based outcomes, quotas, and diversity targets, and to maintain men-only and women-only facilities and sports teams on campus. So again, more Trump attacks on, trans and other gender nonconforming individuals, as well as anything that even smacks of affirmative action. God forbid we, try to increase our diversity on campuses. So Brown was one of 60 colleges and universities that the Department of Education warned earlier this month they could have their federal funding taken away over that stuff, plus alleged anti-Semitic discrimination and harassment on campus, a reason they have also used to recently crack down on Columbia, which agreed to a $200 million fine earlier in July to restore their federal funding. And University of Pennsylvania modified some school records set by transgender swimmer Leah Thomas and agreed to apologize to female athletes. So that's 3 Ivy League institutions in just the last several weeks that have caved to the Trump administration. Harvard, the most famous and most elite of the Ivy League schools, is still battling the Trump administration. Man, it kind of feels icky to cheer for Harvard as the little guy, but yet here we are. Cornell, another Ivy League institution, under attack by the White House, facing more than $1 billion in federal funding cuts. Not just the Ivy League, though. Here we have other elite institutions like Duke. The administration this week froze $108 million for them. And Northwestern, keep getting closer to home. Northwestern saw a halt of $790 million in federal funding. That goes back to April. But now, this week, UCLA has become the largest school targeted by the administration. And we're hitting even closer to home. Big state school, big research school, member of the Big Ten. The Trump administration is freezing hundreds of grants to UCLA for allegedly failing to promote an environment free of anti-Semitism and other bias. This comes days after the university settled a $6.5 million lawsuit that alleged it failed to prevent anti-Semitic behavior. In addition to UCLA, the White House is also investigating UC Berkeley and other campuses in the UC system that have faced multiple investigations this year by both the education and justice departments. There's a lot there. And Derrick, I want to go back to you. It's been a while since I have talked to you here. So what sticks out to you there?
They're using a lot of the protest about Israel and Gaza and the people that are, speaking out about Israel's genocide. They're calling that anti-Semitism. It's not. It's anti-regime. As a Jew, I don't see it as them hating against my faith. It's Netanyahu. And you and I have had plenty of conversations about Netanyahu. They're trying to get rid of DEI. They're trying to get rid of trans athletes, the 7 of them that, harm normal, the normies.
I think it was something like 10 in the entire Division 1, 2, and 3 of the NCAA, which has like hundreds of thousands of athletes. And so, you make a really good point. It sounds like what the administration is doing is saying, if you allow any pro-Palestine sentiment, any professors that teach anything that way, any protests on your campus, any of it, they're calling any pro-Palestine opinion anti-Semitism, and they want it purged from these universities. Now that feels like a very slippery slope. You got the anti-Semitism, you've got their kind of gender binary way of thinking. We've seen them going after racial diversity. Scott, what of these attacks on education strike you as the scariest?
I think he might. Oh, there we go.
Oh, can we hear you, Scott?
Yeah. I'm sorry. It must be a bad day for internet.
That's all right. Hey, Scott's a little choppy right now. So Jennifer, we'll come back to Scott. Let me get your thoughts on the continuing attack on higher education.
I just think it does. Trump just wants to be in control of everything. If it's not this issue, it's going to be something else. He's going to find some kind of way to make universities do whatever it is that he wants them to do, which is to produce a lot less smart people out there in the world that can have good, high-paying jobs. With just everything from lower public education and healthcare, higher education, everything. It's just trying to dismantle people's ability to become educated, have good, high-paying jobs, and have some money and vote. And so these are just one of his many ways in doing that.
They
We've seen
want
changes.
us, they want us undereducated and desperate and just like unable to even think about what they're doing, to comprehend and to make historical parallels to this kind of fascism.
And universities are there, like when you get to the university level, like you learn why you've learned the things that you've learned up to that point. And so if you don't develop that understanding, that makes it very hard to make systematic changes out there in the world. So I have noticed, because I do some things with IU, especially related to hands and autism, and just some of the other, there's just over the last years, there's been so many programs that have been created between like communities and universities and workers and training people. And there's just been a lot of consolidation of that within universities. So like IU has a great department within their medical school for hands and autism, and they have now been combined with another program. I've yet to see programs within the universities that I participated in end, but I have seen a lot and that have been at the federal or state level, like their funding's been cut. Not as many. It's not as easy for them to get together, group together, and find ways to maintain those programs, like we're talking about with the NPR and stuff like that. When you're straight relying, when you work for the government and you're relying on government money, I feel like you have a lot less choices with those programs.
Yeah, and boy, on one hand, okay, great, they're staying away from Indiana schools, they're staying away from my alma mater, IU, but unfortunately, I think that's kind of been a case of us obeying in advance and rolling over ahead of time so they don't have a reason to come at us. Scott, have you been paying attention to IU and their precarious situation amidst all this?
I have been. I have my youngest is entering IU in the fall, so I do pay attention to it. And all of this, it's real simple. This is just like spending $180 billion over ICE for 10 years. This is setting up an ideology for the next decade. Anyone who, like, if you purge people, if you purge Palestine at the university level, students won't know about it. If you purge trans at the university level, again, it's an attempt to control the narrative moving forward for the next decade. And all of these universities are giving up their free speech rights. They're obeying in advance. And it is nothing. I know what you're saying about it. I can't believe I'm voting for Harvard as a little guy, but this is at least Harvard is standing up, whereas Brown and Columbia and all the rest are simply saying, yes, sir, can I have another? Right? Because once they stop on this, they'll go for something else.
Yeah,
never
and
give
Harvard
in to a
can
bully.
because they have this massive endowment, and we do have to stand in solidarity with that incredibly elite institution as they fight back and hope they can withstand these attacks and then sort of lead the pushback that other universities can follow. Let's move on. So also this week, one of Trump's many former personal lawyers, Emil Beauvais, was voted in a very narrow 50-49 vote by the Senate to a lifetime appointment on the Philadelphia-based Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, with only Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins of Maine joining Democrats in the opposition. So this guy Beauvais, and let's there we go. Let's put him up on the screen for you folks who are watching. Just a ghoul of a man. This guy Beauvais overcame fierce opposition from Democrats who walked out in protest when the Senate Judiciary Committee advanced his nomination, and more than 900 former Justice Department employees accused Beauvais of undermining the integrity of the department, including this is a great quote. Beauvais told the attorneys under him in the DOJ that they would need to consider telling the courts, quote unquote, fuck you, and ignore any such court orders telling them to turn deportation planes around. Bovee is also responsible for ordering prosecutors to drop the corruption case against New York Mayor Eric Adams, and he spearheaded the firing and doxing of January 6 prosecutors and FBI agents. So, very extreme individual. Jennifer, have you been paying attention to this Bovee confirmation?
No. I have not at all. Not at all.
Well, yes. Apparently, neither was, say, Indiana Senator Todd Young, who claims to be independent and claims to be a principled conservative, and yet voted for this guy in the face of, like we said, 900 former Justice Department employees saying this guy does not believe in the rule of law.
Have there been any nominations?
Not surprising.
Has there been any nominations that haven't gotten through? I mean, because I think it doesn't really matter what these people carry along with them. It's like the more you got, the more likely you're going to get voted in.
Like we talked about with Brown and others, you've got to stay 100% in line. Todd Young and others try to have it both ways. I mean, he could have gone with Murkowski and Collins and voted no if he had a conscience. There must be somebody somewhat less extreme than Bovee. But
the Republican Party is going to look very different by the end of this year. I'm sure it just keeps evolving. Either the ones that are staying there, that are selling their soul to the devil, or all the newcomers that he's pulling in, because really in the end, it's really allegiance to Donald Trump that is the number one thing, period.
Yeah. Speaking of selling your soul to the devil, now, if you're listening to this, you cannot appreciate this, but if you're watching, we've got a picture of Emile Bovee up on the screen. That man is 44 years old, and I think when he sold his soul to the devil, the first thing Satan asked for return is about 25 years off this dude's face.
Maybe he already knows. Yeah, you can tell with presidents, like when they start office and then you see pictures of them afterwards, just the amount of stress, what it does physically to their body. We should start doing that with some of these people with Trump, like at nomination time. And then when they finally get fired or whatever happens, or the people come.
The man looks like he sleeps in a coffin. And so, Derrick,
look, making fun of people, how they look, will come back to bite to haunt you. So I'm not.
Listen, you know what? In this case, I'm okay with that. I'm punching up.
I got in trouble for saying something about RFK, and I'm autistic, and I was saying something about him, and I had another person very upset with me about it.
I've had the same thing.
Listen, there are worse things about RFK than his vocal quirks, but
okay, you knew exactly what I was talking about.
I think you have to deal with these people on their level sometimes. Trump has made his name in politics over the last 10 to 15 years just insulting people. I don't know, man. People seem to like it. So
he would look good in that.
Emile Bovee is a ghoul. Derrick, by putting this guy in a lifetime appointment on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, are they setting up this ghoul to replace Clarence Thomas or Sam Alito on the Supreme Court?
Okay.
Oh, let's pray to whatever higher power that you believe in. That does not happen. Yeah, this guy's extreme. I mean, I really hope not, but I could see it. I could see it happen in, have 5 Trump appointees on the bench.
So we've had, 30 years now of Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. Yep. He's getting up there. it's about time for him to, roll off in his big corrupt RV that he likes to drive around, and imagine another 30 years, 35, 40 years of a Mille Beauvais on the high court, if you will. Scott, do you care to even entertain that possibility?
So if you look at there's a book called Geniuses, and it talks about how we got here. And we got here by the Koch brothers and other conservatives seeding the courts back in the late 60s and 70s. And among the things that they did was promote all kinds of interesting, what we would call today a meme, and what was then a legal principle. Things like the idea that a corporation has no obligation other than to its shareholders, right? That a corporation has no social responsibility, right? Now, I'm old enough, I'm 57, that I remember when corporations actually weren't all bad, right? It used to be that you had a big corporation, they were a member of the community, they would give money to local little leagues, they would do civic and you don't see that now. Now it's purely about the bottom line, right? And that served the Koch brothers because their corporations are are private, and they can just be, behind the scenes. And they want business like that to be focused on the bottom line so it doesn't make them look bad. Now, you put this guy on the Supreme Court, he is going to continue this principle. And as Democrats, I say it's a real simple thing. Dump term limits, get rid of the lifetime appointment, and then expand the court. Let's put 20 justices on the court, right? Let's change the composition of the court on a fundamental basis. They want to go and seed with ideologues like this. We have to do better. We have to go further. We cannot accept the way the world is today. By accepting it, we automatically lose.
Yeah, if you follow that thread from the early 70s, like you're talking about with the Koch brothers and the Lewis Powell memorandum to the Chamber of Commerce, the founding of the Heritage Foundation, and then in the late 70s, you've got a couple of seminal Supreme Court cases in Buckley and Bellotti that sort of paved the way for Citizens United, and now you have 50 years of extremism reaching their kind of logical conclusion in this Beauvais guy getting a lifetime appointment and potentially a Supreme Court appointment down the line. Very scary stuff. And that's what happens when you let big money, do the driving. And speaking of big money and the economy, our final national story this week, the economy is beginning to show signs of recession. So the White House released Trump's new tariff plan again, changing things up. So the tariff regime was expected to go into effect Friday, now been pushed back to the 7th to give Customs and Border Patrol more time to make changes to collect these new duties. This universal tariff for goods coming into the U.S. will remain at 10%, but that will only apply to countries with which the U.S. has a trade surplus. That does apply to most countries, but a 15% rate will serve as the new floor for countries with which the U.S. has a trade deficit. That will apply to about 40 countries, and more than a dozen have tariff rates higher than 15%, either because they agreed to such a framework or because Trump sent them a letter dictating a higher tariff. Now, amidst all that, the day after they announced this new tariff plan, the stock market took a beating, the Dow closing lower by 542 points, the S&P falling 1.6%, and the NASDAQ falling more than 2%. The S&P 500 and the NASDAQ posted their worst days since April and May, and the Dow posted its worst day in over a month and closed its worst week since early April. all of that, those numbers in response to the tariffs, and a terrible jobs report showing the U.S. economy adding only 73,000 jobs last month. And the totals from May and June were revised down by over 250,000 jobs total. So with those monumental downward revisions, the jobs gains from June were the weakest since December of 2020. That's the last time the labor market had job losses. And here's a great quote. Not if you're a person with a job. The pace of job creation seen so far this year is the weakest in decades outside of recessions. So in response, our dear leader Donald Trump does the only thing one can do in the sight of such terrible job numbers. He responds by firing the person who published the jobs numbers, as one does.
Yep.
Derrick, that's some Banana Republic shit, dog.
No kidding. Like, what happened to don't shoot the messenger? Jeez. Yeah, I mean, we all knew that we were going to go into a recession with the tariffs. It was eventually going to get to us. Jobs. There's a lot of things going on right now with the economy, and Trump doesn't want to hear bad news. He only wants to hear good news. And we have to be happy for our dear leader.
Well, I mean, okay, let's take that to its logical conclusion, though. I mean, Trump puts a loyal sycophant in there to publish the biggest, the most beautiful numbers, the highest numbers go up. That doesn't reflect the reality on the ground, though. I mean, if people are losing their jobs, if the country is in a recession, we will feel it. Numbers be damned. Am I right, Scott?
Absolutely. And don't forget, we saw this during the pandemic when the governor of Florida fired his medical data person, and in order to boost his tourism numbers, and Florida still kept having COVID cases. And the person he fired ran her own shadow data operation, producing actually accurate numbers. Like, I ran a COVID tracker during the pandemic, so I followed this real close. And you can't, like, trying to hide objective reality never works. But this is the state of America in 2025.
Jennifer, some people have said that we are already in a recession and the numbers are just not reflecting it yet. Do you think that is accurate?
It feels like it. I mean, it definitely feels like it. But Americans, like, it takes a while to catch up, right? So, it's summertime. People find a way to do what they want during the summertime. You can get by a little bit. I feel like sometimes a little bit less, but I think it just hasn't really caught up. And it doesn't help when there's just so much back and forth, like and changing the goalpost, like with the tariffs and threatening this tariff and then, extending this deadline and stuff. So I think it's really hard for the average person to really kind of put it all together. But I do think we're paying more at the grocery store. But, we've been talking about being in a recession for quite a while. And sometimes too, whether or not you're in a recession, that does not matter as much to some people. It does to other people too. It can really also depend on where you're at financially and job security. There's a lot of people out there without jobs. I know that for sure, especially certain groups of workers. A lot of social workers out there without jobs. I hear a lot of them talking, the ones that have jobs, I hear them talking about how poor they are treated. For sure. So
there's certainly a lot of that. And well, boy, at the beginning of this year, when Trump was inaugurated, they went on this firing spree in the federal government with Elon Musk and Doge. I mean, you can't fire hundreds and thousands of people without expecting to see some downstream effects there. And
I want to
these
add
numbers are usually a couple months behind, right?
Right. They're behind, but I also want to add something as a business person. Not only myself, but I know I just hear this with people that are looking for jobs and other business owners, that a lot of us are very much at a standstill. So because especially depending on where your funding comes in, I'm kind of waiting on some things myself before I make some other business choices. I see a lot of people talking about applying for a multitude of jobs and nobody's getting back with them. So businesses are interviewing and they're saying that they're hiring, but I think a lot of them are just kind of holding off too. So that definitely affects the economy as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are in a holding pattern, really waiting to see how these tariffs are going to affect them. Trump is changing his mind, it seems like every other week with these tariff policies. They're supposed to go into effect, then he puts a 90-day extension on, just kicking the can down the road. And it really does feel like, with that uncertainty, that we're just bound to wind up in a recession. Scott, am I seeing that right?
You are exactly right. You cannot. So we've all seen the changes in U.S. manufacturing over the last 20 to 30 years. You don't have single products that are made in the U.S. Everything's got a foreign component, right? So, and we've also seen that a lot of companies, they're simply raising prices proactively. They're just making the assumption a tariff's going to come, it's going to affect them, so you may as well make that money now. Why not? The other thing that's going on with respect to hiring is there's been two major changes in hiring that I've seen over the last decade. The first is that, at least in my field, which is tech, the move has been from you don't hire someone who's good enough. You've moved to hiring a perfect person. Perfect people never exist. Companies no longer want to invest in training. They no longer want to accept somebody who doesn't have the ultimate resume. And they know that there's enough people looking for work that they can just hold out. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is all of the hiring sites, people like Indeed, jobmonster.com, et cetera, they've all instituted proactive AI-based filtering on resumes. So you send a resume out, you have no idea anymore if it gets to a real human, right? Once upon a time, you would have had somebody who might have had some compassion in the loop, who would have looked at a resume from an oddball person and said, yeah, I'll talk to that person. Why? Maybe they had a commonality in their history, or they were feeling, guilty about something that day. But we've effectively outlawed compassion with all this AI filtering, right? So now everything is cut and dry. It's purely by the numbers. And that dramatically affects things, right? Like it is a very different world in the hiring space than it used to be.
Yeah, it's very dispassionate and removed from the actual human element. And not to mention just, are places even hiring so much anymore, or are they just giving people gigs, Like the employee is a disappearing breed, and the independent contractor seems to be filling in that void, yeah?
Uh-huh.
And so listen, whenever this happens, when the economy takes a downturn, we're starting to see more unemployment, we're starting to see people struggle. That's going to show up on the streets. And our one big thing today is homelessness in Indiana. We're seeing people on the streets already. We're seeing folks losing their homes already. And when you have nowhere else to go, I don't know what you're supposed to do yet. On July 24th, Trump issued an executive order entitled, quote, "Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets." So this executive order calls for shifting homeless individuals into what they call long-term institutional settings for humane treatment. And if you ever have to say it's going to be humane treatment, that usually means it's not going to be humane treatment. So anyway, yes, long-term institutional settings for appropriate use of civil commitment to restore public order. So what they're saying, they want to take people and involuntarily confine them to asylums. Yay, we're bringing back asylums. They want to defund programs that they say fail to achieve adequate outcomes, including so-called harm reduction or safe consumption efforts. And they want to end support for housing first policies that they say deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self-sufficiency, and increase competition among grantees through broadening the applicant pool. So they want to turn homeless services and just to another business opportunity, it sounds like. Now that is the national outlook on that from the Trump administration. Jennifer, really quick, any thoughts on that before I shift this to a more Indiana-centric discussion?
Well, I know we talked about this briefly before we started the show, but one of the things that really concerns me is the disability population. Not only do a lot of folks end up being homeless with disability and mental health issues, but this is just makes me think of them trying to reinstitutionalize people with disabilities. And we are still working on deinstitutionalizing people. So I could see the state really wanting to roll back, right? Because we're rolling back everything. So we're going to go back and start putting people in institutions. That's what concerns me the most about this. I don't work a lot with the homeless population. I do have lots of friends down in Southern Indiana that do. I do know it is a huge issue. Even if some small communities act like it's not, it isn't. It is a big issue.
Yeah, well, and about the institutionalization, I understand like that largely. We sort of began that endeavor in the 70s, maybe under Nixon, and really ramped it up under Reagan, closing all these like long-term institutional facilities for people with mental illness. And so you hear a lot of folks on the right now say, that's why we have all these homeless folks, that they're mentally ill and that they should have somewhere to go. It's like, well, number one, y'all closed them out of their facilities, but number two, like, yes, these folks need treatment, but going back to that, those were inhumane places generally, and that's why we closed them. So what should we be doing? Go ahead, Scott.
So, I'm an unpaid protester, and I talk to an awful lot of people. One of the people, it's one of my security people, right? A man I'm not going to name. He found himself homeless in the last 18 months. Why? He lost his job. He got behind on a payment, couldn't make his rent, right? This is homeless is a spectrum, and Trump wants to portray it as they're all nuts and drug addicts, etc. This is just a guy who was working as a line cook, missed a payment, got tossed out of his place, found himself on the streets, and was too proud to go for public assistance. So he lived rough for about 18 months, and there is nothing wrong with him as a human, right? So, and Derrick, I can see you nodding your head. I bet you know the statistics on veterans who've been homeless.
Oh yeah.
This is just inhumanity at its heart. Ben Meiselas from the Midas Touch Network, who's a podcast I love to listen to, always says the cruelty is the point.
Yep.
And this is just another example of that. Are there homeless people who actually have mental problems? Sure. But incarcerating people in cages, which is what they're talking about, right? Don't believe this. Oh, humanity. Oh, the humane treatment. It's going to be putting people in cages just like they put kids in cages at the border, right? The real solution on this is to deal with housing. And quite honestly, I would wager that if you looked at this in terms of housing and building tiny homes, it would end up being cheaper and be a long-term solution. What this is this is just another economic opportunity for the right. It's another grift, and it's madness.
Yeah, because inevitably these what they're calling, humane long-term institutional settings are going to be private enterprises, most likely Republican donors who are going to get those sweet government contracts to incarcerate people. Now, Scott mentioned veterans. Jennifer mentioned the disabled population. This is two groups of folks that are overrepresented amongst the homeless population. And there was a story, actually several stories in the Indianapolis Star this week regarding a homeless camp there in the Fountain Square neighborhood. And at least one of the stories centers around a disabled woman talking about how she had come to be homeless and living in this camp, and her disabled brother too. And so this Fountain Square homeless camp has been controversial for several months. So the city said on July 25th that they were going to shut it down here in a couple weeks. This reverses the city's prior stance. As recently as July 23rd, they said the camp did not warrant closure under a 2021 city ordinance called the Homeless Bill of Rights. That policy typically allows residents to stay in camps as long as they are not, quote, overrun with waste, blocking a public right-of-way, or severely threatening public safety. So, whenever you get a situation like this, you're going to see some neighbors and local businesses who complain about this camp being in their neighborhood. And so they complained about trash, human and animal waste, drug use, and drunkenness. And there was also an alleged instance of animal abuse at this camp, pretty gruesome. And so city officials and social workers were called in. They're ramping up a program called Streets to Home Indy, which is aiming to move more than 300 people known to be living outdoors into housing by next June. Well, the problem with that is that this program has not ramped up yet, and they're going to push these folks out before the Housing First program is ramped up. So many of the residents won't be housed because it's still getting underway. Many neighbors and advocates denounced the decision as merely shifting the problem of unsheltered homelessness from one neighborhood to the next, because they're going to shut down this camp. These people have nowhere to go. They're just going to go to another camp or make another camp. And the Office of Public Health and Safety Director Andrew Merkley said these folks will be offered emergency shelter beds, but he conceded that those beds aren't good options for many people because, they force people into group living situations that aren't appropriate. They also often impose restrictions on couples or pets or, substance use. So in Indy, we have this very visible problem popping up into the news. Scott, are you in Indianapolis?
Fishers, actually.
Fishers. Okay, so have you been paying attention to the story? It's right down the way.
I have.
So, what do you think? I mean, is shutting down this camp gonna help at all?
It's just kicking the can down the street. Ultimately, what we have to do is we have to help people. We have to accept that when you have a social safety net that is as sparse as we have, at some point, people are going to fall through the cracks. And the solution is to look at them as victims rather than as people that are the goal on the right is to say everyone's, succeed or fail. It's all Darwinian. And I think success is nuanced enough that you have to accept that sometimes people need help. I don't know anyone in the world who actually succeeded purely on their own merits, right? We all get help from the system somehow.
Yeah, we really do. Derrick, you you say you've seen a lot of veterans fall into the homelessness trap.
Mhm.
You are there programs in place to at least keep our veterans housed? I mean, if anybody has earned it, it's our veterans.
In LA, they're doing something for veterans. Trump has ordered, I think it was a $600 million, I don't want to say facility, but area to house homeless veterans. But there isn't much out there for veterans. And I mean, just to be completely honest here, I know what it means to be homeless. Not as an outsider looking in, but when I was a kid, I slept in a car at the beach in Southern California because my parents did not know how to handle money. There was nothing wrong with them mentally. They just didn't know how to handle money. When we moved back to Indiana, because my mom got a job at DFAS in Lawrence, once again, fell into that issue of my parents missing a bill, spending money they shouldn't have, and ending up at Dayspring Center in downtown Indy. I've slept in cars at parking lots at Walmarts. I mean, I know what it's like to be a homeless child. So to me, this isn't about the political aspect of it. It's personal for me because I've lived that life and I was able to, as soon as I turned 18, I went into the military. And that's what saved me from being homeless myself. There are safety nets out there. There's the township trustees, which their primary thing is helping people in need. But I mean, 1 in 10 homeless are veterans. 90% of those veterans have PTSD. I'm 100% VA because of PTSD. There isn't one person who serves in the military that doesn't have PTSD. We all have it from something. Military is not for the faint of heart. But, I mean, we need to concentrate on the housing first model. We need to get rid of the barriers that are stopping people from getting into a house, into a shelter, into a tiny home. Because that is what's stopping people from being able to get help. Is if somebody relapses, they're kicked out of the program.
Mm-hmm.
There are tons of families that are in the same situation that my family was when I was a kid. There's nothing mentally wrong with them. Just they didn't know how to handle money. They got laid off from a job. They just life happened and they had nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
So I mean, if there was a program out there, and there is, Seattle, Portland, let me see, Salt Lake City, Houston, Texas, Burlington, Vermont, and Seattle, Washington have housing first models, and they are doing great. Over, I think it was 27,000 people have actually gone from homeless to housed. in these programs. They've gotten jobs through them. They've gotten mental help. They've gotten addiction help from these programs. And Indiana needs that. Almost.
Yeah. Sorry, Derrick.
Major city needs it.
Yeah, 100%. And so this Streets to Home program in Indy, is part of their housing first approach. And yeah, there are, like you said, other cities like Dallas, Milwaukee, Cleveland have done this too. Cities about the same size as Indianapolis. But these are the kind of programs, and we know they work, right? The statistics prove that housing first is the number one most effective at keeping people housed, but also it's cheaper than a policing first model like we use in so many places. But that Trump order that we talked about is specifically aiming to end support for housing first policies, because they say those deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment, recovery, and self-sufficiency. Those are their words. And so what we're gonna find if they don't support housing first policies, we're just going to wind up putting more people on the streets, kicking the can down the road, and pushing the problem from place to place. And on those lines, I wanted to bring up something that the mayor here in Bloomington said this week. So Carrie Thompson held a press conference, which is a exceedingly rare occurrence for her, but this one in particular was focused on housing. Now, Mayor Thompson, who ran in part on her experience as the CEO of Habitat for Humanity here in Monroe County, blamed other jurisdictions for transferring their homeless populations to Bloomington. She says that people come to Bloomington for resources like rehabilitation or hospital services that are unavailable in their own place of residence. And that's true. I mean, Bloomington, Indianapolis, seems like these blue, Democratic run cities actually try to take care of people. So, other jurisdictions will send their folks to those places. And then these people find themselves unable to get back to their place of residence and wind up here in Bloomington on the streets, in our limited shelter capacity, in tent villages, just like this one in Indianapolis. She did not say who is doing this, but did say that other, cities in town in Indiana are sending their people here to Bloomington. Jennifer, have you seen any of this?
Have I seen?
Do you know if folks down that way are getting sent up here to Bloomington, or are they sending them to Louisville? Or
I have not heard any of that. Yeah, I have no idea.
Well,
sorry.
What do you think? Does that comport with sort of the sort of thing you see with folks that are struggling? There aren't services nearby, and then they have to go, maybe the next town or the next couple towns over.
It's sometimes different depending on if you're in a rural community or more towards the city, because a lot of times in rural communities, people have been there longer. They are smaller. They have a different feel. They often know each other. So a lot of people can get a little extra help from family members or other people maybe in the community. Whereas when you are in, a larger area like Indianapolis, you're just one of many. A lot of times you kind of get lost in the shuffle. So people probably do gravitate more though towards those larger cities. There's more groups of people. It's easier to find a park bench, unfortunately, in the city than it is out, in the rural community. But as far as Bloomington, that is kind of a magnet, though, for a lot of folks, I think. Bloomington's very different than the rest of the state. And you've got a university there. So I would assume actually people needing some extra supports. A lot of times universities do fill in a lot of those gaps. So that might be another reason why people might gravitate there. IU has a lot of different schools. They do a lot of different supports with health and homelessness and rural communities and stuff as well. So
Yeah, and I can't speak to, the university portion of that. I do know what homeless services we do have in the city are largely run through nonprofits or religious organizations. We certainly don't have enough. We do have quite a significant unhomed population in Bloomington for a city our size. And I do think that is specifically because we do try things like offering services and getting folks into houses and generally taking a hands-off approach from the incarceration standpoint. So you do sort of wind up in this vicious circle where places that are trying to do the humane thing, I think maybe are inviting more of a burden because, oh, here's a place where like maybe we'll actually get some help, or we can actually get some services, or we at least won't get arrested for just existing outdoors.
Well, it's the same as like with the sanctuary cities. I mean, there are cities and towns where people know that they can probably be more supported. I want to say homelessness is a big issue everywhere. It's just that there's certain communities that actually acknowledge it and try to deal with it. I mean, I've lived out in Mooresville outside Indianapolis for years, and I didn't even really know there was a huge homeless population until one of my children had told me years ago when they were in school and they were down by the river, where I live in Clark County, more towards the Louisville area. There is a huge population, but I know just in my community in Charlestown that we have homeless people living in the similar ways that they did out there in Mooresville. And that is something that's being talked about more. In Southern Indiana, there is a homeless coalition. Who's Your Action also does a lot with homelessness in the Southern Indiana. They're out of New Albany. So like I said, it is a big issue everywhere. It's just more visible and talked about more in certain communities as well. Because
I do understand down there on the other side of the river in Louisville, they have a pretty good program. I think. Oh, what is it? Hope Village, I think it was called. Yeah, Hope Village. And it's basically like I think Scott was talking about with the it's tiny homes. And
yes.
It's something that apparently has worked pretty good there. And maybe we could consider in towns like Bloomington or the big city like Indianapolis is not something that we're currently doing right now. There's so much more to talk about on this. It's such a deep subject, and in the wealthiest country in the history of ever, we should not have a homeless.
No, I want to throw something in on the homelessness before we leave. Just did something that I've learned. Like when you talk about homelessness, it's not necessarily the people that you see on the street or the people that you don't see on the street. There's different categories. There could be somebody who just lost their home, so they're temporarily staying with a family member or a friend, or maybe they have a voucher or somebody has paid for them to be in a hotel for a little bit of time, or they're coming out of an institution or prison. So there is just a lot of different types of homelessness, of people on the verge of becoming homeless as well.
Yeah, to add some statistics to that, I have these right here. They're talking about about 350 people. This is in Indianapolis, actually living on the streets. That's only about 20% of the city's homeless population that are actually living out on the streets. And yeah, like you said, you got people doubling up or living in cars or like long-term hotels and whatnot. So it is a bigger problem than even what we see. And we will continue this discussion down the road. It's unfortunately not going away, but I did want to give you folks time to say your goodbyes and tell folks where they can find you online before we get out of here. Scott, where can the good folks find you?
Mostly on Blue Sky these days. Fuzzy Group on Blue Sky. So
fuzzy group. Interesting. All right. Very good. Derrick, where can the folks find you? I understand you have announced you're running for office again next year.
That is a possibility, for township trustee for Jackson County or Jackson Township, Morgan County. So that's a possibility. Looking at also a campaign manager spot for someone running for Congress. What I ran for. So,
a lot of knowledge to share there.
Yeah. But you can find me at Facebook under Derrick Holder or the People's Fourth, and Blue Sky, Instagram, DerrickHolder.com. I'm all over the place.
Very good. I fully understand being all over the place. Jennifer, how about you? Where can the good folks find more from you?
More from me. I am all over the place, but I use Facebook most of the time for my social media. Jennifer David for Hoosiers is also just Jennifer David. I also work with people with disabilities through the Kimberly Renee Foundation and Outward Bound Community Services. And I got a new venture coming up here as well. So you'll find me all over.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Jennifer David, Derrick Holder, Scott Johnson. I appreciate you being here with me. You've been a fantastic panel today. Can't wait to have you all back. But in the meantime, I will see you next week. This has been Who's Left This Week. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.